Hi, everybody. Matt Lawton here, and this is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather report for the week of October 7th through 13th. Very interesting week where we have Jupiter stationing retrograde as it hits a sextile to Chiron retrograde, and then all four of the inner planets, including the sun as one of them, will hit the Jupiter Chiron sextile and trigger it as the week goes on. And on top of that, Mercury moving fast gets towards the end of its sign that it's in, and therefore, which is Libra right now, and therefore it's going to hit all those outer planets that I've been talking about that are at the end of their signs. So it's going to do that and then go into Scorpio. So very interesting week, a couple different energies to talk about. First off, just a little business here. The Astrological Winds channel is a free video blog that I do on YouTube every week. If you like what you see and you have your own YouTube account, you can become a follower, and that will allow you to know whenever I post it. Especially, you got to have your notifications on those, so don't forget to do that. Um, Also, remember it was a podcast long before it was a YouTube channel, and it's still available on podcasts too. Seeing the podcast numbers have been going up significantly lately, so it seems like more people are catching back on to that. And that does give you the ability, to listen to the blog at other times, not be married to the video necessarily. The audio part is the important thing. And also, Astrological Winds channel has its own Instagram page. So if you have an Instagram page and you want to be a follower there, that's another place where I will post links to the blog and sometimes other information even during the week on Instagram. And then also, I have it posted on my Facebook page, which is my private page. That's Matthew Lawton, Lauten. If you want to friend me there, it'll show up in your newsreel every week. And then the other place to find it, and really the best place to find it besides YouTube, is on my website. That's www.astrologicalwinds.com. I embed it every week there, and I actually keep the older ones there too, to a certain point, so you can always go back and refer to them if you missed one that you want to check out again. The monthly ones are there. Also, that shows all the information on my professional services. I am a professional astrologer, have been one for over 20 years, was trained professionally for 7 years before I did that. So would love to do your chart or someone else's chart that is looking for that service. I have all kinds of different readings I do too. So go on the website and check the menu out there. I can work with you with your finances if that's an issue. Start up a conversation. My contact is there. Also, if you have a group that's looking for like a lecture class, etc., or if you're a professional who's looking for daily or weekly or monthly advice, get in touch with me. And once again, my contact's there, and it's matthue823@gmail.com. And remember too, the blog is a free service I'm giving, so I ask everybody to pass the link along. If you'd like to give a donation, my Venmo handle is at the symbol at Matthew with two T's and then hyphen Lawton, Lauten, capital M and L at the beginning of the name. So at Matthew hyphen Lawton, and every $5 you give enters you into a chance to win a free reading at the end of the year. So, and remember, the other last thing I like to remind people, I know a lot of you guys definitely know some astrology and you tell me how much you learn from me, which is great. And I know there is a smaller amount of you that don't know any astrology but are interested in knowing about what the energy is. So remember, don't get lost on the astrological terms if you're one of those people and you want to really hear the interpretation. That's what's important. So just starting this week, like I said, it's an interesting week. Jupiter stations retrograde, which I talked about at length in the monthly a couple weeks ago. So you can go back to that and reference that. Now, Chiron has already been retrograde in Aries and Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. And so they are going to sextile one another this week too. And in general, if you were going to say what that energy represents, it's like finding new ways of like learning things that can be very helpful and beneficial to us. It can help us break through into new places, expand our lives, grow in our consciousness, because things that may have been holding us back that were based on past things, we see now new ways to um, of learning about those things, integrating those things, and we can start to move forward. And what that does is it opens up new possibilities to us. And those possibilities, if we act on them, the opportunities and possibilities, they can bring in a great satisfactory healing energy, where it seems like certain things that may have been holding us back for a long time, and a lot of them may be abstractions, even, just ideas, philosophies that maybe we were stuck on for a long time, and now all of a sudden we're seeing new ways of dealing with that energy that is helping us, that it can even be appealing to some of our natural abilities and talents, and therefore it can be a very, very healing type of energy. So this is a time where we can really assess things that have happened to us and see them in a new light. And part of that process, to me too, with both, with Jupiter going retrograde in Gemini and Chiron already retrograde in Aries, is it may once again be with information we already have, or things from the past that we're finally mentally integrating more deeply. We're stepping back now, and that's all of a sudden, we may have missed seeing what those opportunities were initially, and now we're seeing them as both these planets are retrograde. And Jupiter in Gemini is like, oh, it's a new way to learn. So it's very curious. It's like, oh, Jupiter will have us open up and want to receive that, become more receptive to what that may be, give us a good attitude about what that may be. And then the Chiron in Aries is where it's really self-driven. Like I've said for several years now, with Chiron in Aries, it's all about our own healing processes and learning processes, is all being by our own initiative. So once again, this is something where we can see something that can be really beneficial to us personally in this, where it's appealing once again to something that we do well already, and that can be bringing up some of these new opportunities and new ways to learn. So this is my point about bringing this up in the beginning, is this is a very impregnated energy of this whole week. And then we're going to go along this week, and each of the inner planets are going to hit Jupiter and Chiron and kind of unfold a story for us. So that's the first thing I wanted to touch on. Now on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, if you're watching the blog on Monday, when I think most people watch it, there's a continuation of the energy of last week. If you remember, we had that grand trine in water last week among Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Cancer, both of them in weak signs, and Saturn in Pisces retrograde. And this week on Tuesday, we get the exact trine of Venus to Mars in that grand trine. So that's going to continue that energy. And just like a little, briefly in that, first off, it's very creatively stimulating energy. Like there's a lot of creativity that is in the Venus trine Mars. So like it may have us very productive with whatever we're creative in, and that can feel very satisfying. It can feel really, really good. It's also really good for basically all relationships, because we're feeling good about ourselves. It can come out as very harmonious in our relationships with one another too. And then as far as relationships that are intimate. This is a beautiful, beautiful energy. It really, flows people's energy together. And like I said last week, the way this energy is set up with the Scorpio energy and the Saturn involved too, it is set up for building long term stability in very intimate type relationships. So it can be some very, very beautiful energy that can really top out on Tuesday on that level too, and can really stabilize that energy for a long time and really be very intimately satisfying and deep on that level. So this is also Tuesday's also the day that the first planet will hit the Jupiter and Chiron, and that's Mercury. And Mercury is actually going to trine Jupiter and oppose Chiron. So what I think in the process of what I was talking about with that Jupiter Chiron and what that means in a general bigger process, I think what's going to happen here in the first step with Mercury trining Jupiter and opposite Chiron is like we're going to see some really good ideas that come out of integrating that Jupiter Chiron stuff, like where when we get these new ways of understanding and learning things, so all of a sudden what that's going to do is open up a floodgate in the mind to some really big grand visions and plans and ideas. So Tuesday's a really good day to work on that, to organize the planning in your mind, to work towards the future with a big vision, a grand vision over these new things that you're learning. This is an excellent day in particular to work in business, to do business deals, agreements, any kind of business type activity. The mind is very, very sharp. It's very acute. It can see the big patterns and things, and it like takes any new information that it gets in and is very tolerant of it and will study it and will integrate it into the philosophies and values that it has. So it's very, very driven on those levels. And really in particular is great. Like if you're studying anything that's like, what you call secondary education, so you already have the basic info on it, this can really bring in more of that. And in particular with stuff with law, philosophy, religion, medicine, things like that, you can really get the depth of. Now, what's interesting too, when you think about the Mercury Chiron opposition at the same time, what's great about that one is it helps us see things from every angle, right? So it plays into the tolerance part of the Mercury Jupiter and tips the opposition in the favor of, like, once again, seeing things from everybody's side. And when you do that, that's what's really great about like being able to negotiate, come to agreements, do business, work on your plans together, because everyone kind of has an open mind, and you have like the ability of like the hummingbird's energy to move in every direction as needed, so very interesting energy that comes up there. Now, what's interesting, the negative part of Mercury Chiron would be being too stuck on some of your own thoughts and ideas and beliefs, or perceiving that someone else is. And this energy will not stand for that. It will definitely like stand up to anyone who you think is being too narrow-minded or stuck. So I don't think that's the way most people are going to go with this, because the Jupiter Chiron and the Mercury Jupiter are just going to open the mind up, and it's going to see the possibilities. And so the Mercury Chiron opposition is going to work into that positive energy, I think, mainly, where it's like, oh yeah, I can see it from every angle. I can work this from so many different sides. So really good energy there on Tuesday to start on this. Then Wednesday is actually the day that Jupiter does go retrograde. And I'm not going to go in detail over what that means. Again, if you didn't listen to the monthly, which is at the end of the weekly from 2 weeks ago, then go back to that. And I talk about Jupiter going retrograde and Pluto going direct in more detail. So then we get to Thursday, right? And that's when Venus hits the Chiron Jupiter. And this one is even it's very, very interesting because Venus is actually going to quincunx both of them. They're sextiles, and Venus is on the long midpoint, that means, which means there's a lot of fate tied up in this one. And this is where I think, we're going to see relationships are part of this energy too, that there's certain fated relationships that are going on right now. And part of this Jupiter Chiron process is to filter through the relationships right now. See, I think what this one is doing, Venus, Jupiter, Chiron, is making us all realize we need love and affection. We need intimacy in our lives, right? But we need it with the right people. We need it with the people that we vibe well with. And so, what the two quincunxes are doing is saying, discern who that is and start to adjust to that. And part of adjusting is letting go and releasing certain people. So, people who, for want of a better term, you're relating to them is a disadvantage to you because of what they do. Remember, in relationships, we're always put at the whims of the other person. It's kind of part of the deal. When you're in a relationship with other people, no matter what kind of relationship it is, what they do does affect you. So, like, from our standpoint, many times that can be, whimsical, but it puts us sometimes at a disadvantage. So this energy is really showing us that it's going to it's this one's more faded. So it's going to actually, by events, what people are doing, it's going to show us who we want to make that more deep connection with and who we need to kind of separate ourselves more from and keep them more at arm's length, because we do recognize under this energy that we do want that energy in us, but we can also see how people who are difficult to deal with, can bring us down. And so, like, this can help us really figure out who those people are. And I think it's just going to happen, you guys, too, because, like, it's like something that we can't really control, right? We can't control what other people do. So we're going to get swept along by this and be forced to do that. And if we don't, we may find ourselves with people where we are having to sacrifice some of our standards and values just to be with that person. So that's really not what we want to do, right? Then comes Friday, and Friday is the day Pluto does go direct on the same exact day it did last year. And once again, I talked about that at length in the monthly. I don't want to go back into that. I want to use the rest of this time to continue this very interesting Jupiter Chiron energy. And now Mercury is what's going to get really involved here as it gets near the end of Libra. All of a sudden, it's going to hit those three outer planets. So that starts on Friday when it quincunxes Uranus, right? And when Mercury quincunxes Uranus, remember, it's always Mercury and Uranus are both about the intellect, the mind, logic, and higher and lower minds. So, so it brings together the intellect and the intuition. With a quincunx, it's very jumpy energy. It's very edgy energy. The mind is like overstimulated. There's a lot of input coming at it from all different angles, and it gets very jumpy. It gets very edgy. It gets very restless, right? And therefore can make decisions that are not thought out well at all. So it's not a good day to make anything that's a serious decision. Now, it will also, because of that, be very hard to focus and concentrate. Like your mind is just like can get easily distracted. So we have to be really careful of like even the way we're moving around, or we can, get ourselves into accidents, things like that. It's very, very hard to discipline the mind and keep it focused on anything with this energy. And so, like I said, not a good day to make decisions. Now, one thing it does do is it is very an inventive mind. So we may come up with some very original ideas, right? And see them from angles that are a different way, that are an odd way, offbeat, but like where you can see things are connected. So that can be really valuable. I really think that can be valuable. And then the very next day, Saturday, is when Mercury then quincunxes Neptune. And what's interesting to me about that is that means that once again, Mercury is on the long midpoint of Uranus and Neptune together. But here, when Mercury, combines them. When Mercury goes into the quincunx, the Neptune zone, this all of a sudden gives a very sensitive mind. It goes over into the right brain. It gets very imaginative. It really picks up off the environment, any of the energy. So once again, this is kind of like be really careful of the vibration of the people around you. This goes back to that Venus Jupiter Chiron thing on Thursday, where if you're surrounded with people that are restless, or in an environment that's noisy and restless, then it's gonna like really get at you on Friday and Saturday and make you very restless too. And this is like a nervous sensitivity when it comes to this stuff. So it can be really like hard to relax. So it's best try to find a kind of peaceful, quiet, contemplative environment on Saturday to chill out in. Now, part of the thing that's kind of odd about this one too is it can lower our self-confidence. And what we do many times with that is we start to like, be a little bit deceptive with what we're saying, a little bit like maybe caving into our fears, not feeling very confident, telling a story. And that's just like really creating more confusion in the energy. But it definitely, with all of them together, the three of them together, it gives a very odd imagination, where, and we can get very preoccupied with things like metaphysics, the supernatural world, the occult, spirituality, what's driving us, things like that. And then even like getting into this dreamy state of like, oh, this is a situation or a place in the future that I want to get to, that I want to plan on getting there, and get us into the zone of like kind of thinking it out in our minds. So very, very, very interesting odd energy. And then Sunday is actually the busiest day of the week. First, let's finish off with Mercury, and then Mars and the Sun are going to hit the Jupiter Chiron also. But first, Mercury, so there's Pluto right at the end of Cap, right? So it's going to square Pluto right before it changes signs and goes into Scorpio. And so when Mercury is square Pluto, that gives a very obsessive mind. We can really get narrow minded and focused on one thing to the point where we blow it way out of proportion. Like it may be that important to us, but it's not really that important in the greater scheme of things. And then we can try to be really coercive and trying to force that point of view onto others. And all that does is annoy them and get them irritated and angry with you. Then you get angry and irritated with them, and it becomes this vicious cycle of who's trying to force their ideas down the other person's throat. And it can get like, the commenting can get cutthroaty and bad and ugly. So I mean, this is really like energy, once again, brings great focus and concentration, and I recommend using it to do research on things that you're really deeply into. Especially the last degree there, the 30th degree, you can really do some deep research on your own mind, actually, and see what really drives you and come to terms with that and somehow be your own analyst, basically, is a good way to say it. But like, have to be really, really, just like I said, really kind of careful with that energy otherwise, because otherwise we can really blow things out of proportion, get ourselves in arguments and battles, and kind of get like, really like into some like bad places with that with people. But then Mercury goes into Scorpio right after that, which is similar to Pluto's energy. So those next few weeks while Mercury's in Scorpio, that means the mind is really good at doing investigative and research work. So any kind of project you have at work or at home or anything in your interest where you're really trying to get into the deep, get to the bottom of things, this is the time to do that. It's very interesting too because people don't speak as much when Mercury's in Scorpio. So it starts to create almost like an air of secretiveness around people, and like we can get suspicious of one another. Actually, it can play into like, well, what's this person really up to, what are they really thinking, and play into kind of like some odd fears on that level. But when we do get upset with people, which can happen, Mercury and Scorpio can be very judgmental, and when you get really angry, when it comes out, it can be very cutting words. I mean, you can really hurt people with your words and really cut them down when Mercury is in Scorpio. So what you rather do with that energy is kind of turn it into almost like a sarcastic humor. I mean, Mercury Scorpio is actually really good at comedy from the darker shadow side, like seeing like just the ugly atrocity, shadowy stuff that's behind things, and adopting this sarcastic, sharp sense of humor around it. But like I said, people have a lot of secrets, that they keep to themselves while Mercury's in Scorpio. And so it can feel deceptive at times. They may actually be deceiving one another. They may be literally lying to one another, while they're trying to figure it out, so that's part of it. And then Mars does its little hit, and it squares Chiron. Actually is what Mars does. It doesn't actually hit Gemini because they're in the signs next to one another, but it does square Chiron. And so I think what happens by the end of the week, that shows us that, okay, now we have these ideas, these plans, we've seen our relationships are pushing it that way too. And now we have to initiate the actions that will help us adapt to what we're seeing in these new things that we're learning, in these new ways of approaching things. Now, one of the things about Mars Chiron, though, is to be careful with our bodies on the weekend, too. That we can easily overstress our bodies and hurt or injure ourselves or lower our immune systems enough that we take in an illness. So that's something to be aware of. But this is literally about like, okay, now I see how I can get around the things that are blocking me. Now I need to take the task on. I need to roll up the sleeves. I need to go do it. Now, at the same time, on Sunday, the sun is hitting the Jupiter Chiron by doing the same thing Mercury did on Tuesday, and that is trining Jupiter and opposing Chiron. And I think that's really good. Sun trine Jupiter traditionally is one of the most positive aspects there is. It's all about expansion, growth, and those kind of things that are beneficial on our path and are good for us for the long term, for the future. So I think by Sunday, we go through this whole week, we're going to see how that Jupiter Chiron is working for us. And we're going to see the possible benefits that we have for the future. And we're going to see that it can bring us accomplishments. It can bring us success. It can bring us things like that. So we'll get kind of into this enthusiastic, positive framework, and life reacts to that. We get in harmony with ourselves. We get in harmony with other people. We see the big picture really well, and we can organize plans for that and really work and allow in new experiences into our mind with this really tolerant energy. Allow the energy to unfold. Now, once again, the Chiron part is showing that, yeah, we're going to see where we blocked ourselves, and that can be a little bit of painful to go through the blockages and accept that. But it's all about, the fight in ourselves. If we